Have you ever had to have one of those conversations that was just uncomfortable? You knew that it was going to be uncomfortable for you and also for the ones that you were talking to. There's a couple of topics, at least for me when I was growing up, that we just didn't talk about in my house. It didn't matter if we had an interest or we were concerned or we wanted answers to a question. We just didn't talk about them. They were taboo. They were just subjects that we completely avoided. And I got to be honest, for some of you today, the conversation is going to be uncomfortable. At moments, you're going to find yourself internally squirming, asking the question, do we really have to talk about this? If you only knew where I was or what I'm going through or where I've been or how I've gotten to this place, you would sympathize and you would understand with me. Let's just get ready because it's going to be uncomfortable. There's a topic that Jesus talked about a lot throughout the Bible, and not just Jesus, others talked about, and it's the topic of money. And when most people talk about money, especially in the context of the church, we automatically rush to and assume, well, they just want my money. They don't care about me. They don't care about what's going on in my life. All they care about is just give more money, give more money, give more money. And that's really not what we're talking about today. When we talk about living beyond me and being a generous person, it goes so far beyond the church. It actually intersects into every part of our daily lives. And to just help you understand how difficult this topic is, I want to share some statistics with you. The average American household today carries around $101,915 in debt. That's a weight. That is a weight that we're not meant to carry. This includes student loans, credit cards, cars, other consumer debt. 41% of Americans report that their financial situation causes them significant stress. For some of us in the room today, we're saying, that's me. Yes, I'm raising my hand. That's me. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to talk about it. There's moments that I just don't even want to deal with it. It is what it is. Nearly 60% of Americans don't have a budget. They don't budget. 21% of Americans say that they've never saved a dime for retirement. We'll just see what happens in the end. At some point when I'm not able to work, we'll just see what happens. We'll see how it works itself out. 56% of Americans would struggle to cover a $1,000 emergency. That means many of us are living paycheck to paycheck with little room for unexpected challenges. And when it comes to the idea of being generous, living a generous life, only about 5% of churchgoers give regularly. They give on a regular basis, with the average giving per person in church being around $17 a week. Money. It's one of those topics that no one wants to talk about. And so this morning, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Set aside all your preconceived notions and ideas of what you think I'm going to say or what the Bible says. Open up your hearts. Be receptive and allow God to speak to you exactly where you are, because I realize sitting in this room and even online this morning that we're all at different stages when it comes to being generous and living a generous life. When it comes to dealing with our finances. For some of us, we check the box and say, hey, bro, I got this all figured out. There's nothing you can teach me that you can help me with or show me how to be better than where I'm at now. For some of us, we would say, yeah, I am working myself out of this pit that I've been in for a long time, but I actually see light at the end of the tunnel, and it works. I feel freedom every day that I put one step in front of the other. I feel like I'm getting a hold of this thing. And for others, I'm drowning. I don't know where to go. Every decision that I make, every corner that I turn, it seems to be wrong. It seems to be out of step. How do I actually begin to get a hold of this instead of it holding me? So no matter where you are this morning, be open. Be open, because here's the thing. Getting beyond me enables us to live beyond me. Getting beyond me means getting beyond our past financial struggles. It means letting go of the past. It means less stress. Stop worrying about the things. It means less limitations. It means that we're allowing and being open to God to enable us to live a generous life. And yes, finances happens to be one of those areas that you and I can be generous in. And for some, they can be more generous than others. But it's time for you and I to get practical. If you have your Bibles, I want you to open them up to Luke chapter 16. Luke chapter 16, what we find in Luke 16 is a story that Jesus is telling the disciples, and it's a story about a manager. Someone that is managing something for someone else, an employee. They work for somebody, and part of their responsibility is to manage what their owner has. And they discover that the manager's corrupt. He kind of lives by his own rules. He does what he wants, and then all of a sudden, he's being called. He's being called out. Hey, bud, why are you managing the way that you're managing? Why are you using and doing the things that you're doing with my stuff? And automatically in his mind, and I think what would happen for you and for me, is we race to solutions. Well, how am I going to respond to him? He knows what I've been doing. He knows the things that I've been saying and the things that I've been taking his business. What is he going to do? Here's how I'm going to respond. And we see this response from the manager, and his response is simple. I'm going to go to everyone that owes my manager something, and I'm going to cut in half, or I'm going to cut part of what they owe down, so later when I don't have a job, they'll find favor with me. They'll find favor with me. They'll look on me and say, he was kind to me when I owed a lot. But the manager calls him out. What are you doing? Why are you managing the way that you're managing? And the reality is that for you and for me, for those of us that are followers of Jesus, we are managing for the owner being God. We are managing what he has given us. Well, I know the argument. I'm the one that got this job. God didn't get this job. I'm the one that puts in the work. I'm the one that does everything that I do. It has nothing to do with God. Can I just take you back to Genesis? That he was the creator of everything. Everything that you and I know and experience and have is because of who God is and what God has done. So he's placed you and I in a position to manage the life that we live and the things that we have and the places that we go and the jobs that we work and the way that we use the resources that have been given to us. We're managers. So look at what it says in Luke 16, starting in verse 10. It says, whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. Kind of referring back to the manager. He was given a lot of responsibility. And in that responsibility, he became very selfish and only thought about himself and what he wanted and what he needed and what he expected. And so he didn't manage it well. Whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? He's asking this question. How can I trust you to manage what I've given you? As a parent of two kids, it's been interesting watching them navigate money two totally, radically different ways. I have one son that doesn't like to spend anything unless it's somebody else's money. I mean, he has no problem spending mom and dad's money, but when it comes to his money, when it comes to him managing his finances, he saves everything. Everything. We were having a conversation the other day. He had sent me a text and he said, hey, is this shopping week? Yes, it's shopping week. Okay, well, I'm going to go buy some stuff that I want to take on a trip, and can you pay me back since it's shopping week? I'm like, what? Yeah, because I've moved all of my money into my savings and I don't have a lot of money in my checking account. And I'm like, bro, don't you have like $1,000 in an envelope in your room? Yeah, but that's not able to spend. That's one side of the coin in my house. And then the other one. Hey, Dad, can you take me to the store? I need to buy something. I'm going fishing with my buddies and there's some stuff I want to get. Okay, bud, yeah, let's go to the store. And this is yesterday. We get to the store, he starts grabbing stuff off the shelf, and I look at him and I'm like, hey, bud, how much money do you have? Well, none. How are you going to pay for this? How are you going to pay for the things, the items that you want? And he began to look at each item, and he's like, well, you are. We approach finances and money from two totally different perspectives. And the reality is that for some of us, when it comes to managing, whether it be little or small, some of us manage it very, very well. And others, it's like, I'll figure it out. I always land on my feet. I always seem to get ahead, or even when I do fall behind, it's okay. I seem to figure it out. We've got to become faithful in the little things. We've got to become faithful in the little things. So practically, how do you and I become faithful? How do we become faithful in the little things? It starts with developing a budget. As you heard in the statistics that I listed for you, 60% of Americans don't have a budget. Or if they have a budget, this is the budget that they have. I'll pay all my bills, and whatever's left over, I'll do whatever I want. When my wife and I got married, because we did not talk about money in my house, it was a subject with another subject that we just didn't talk about. They were never on the table. I never saw my mom and my stepdad, I never saw them talk about finances at all. They never sat me down and said, hey, bud, this is how you manage what you make, and this is how you make sure you actually tell your money what to do versus your money telling you what to do. We just didn't talk about it. And when I say a budget, I talk about a zero-based budget, meaning I tell every dollar that I make where it is going. Every dollar. There's not a, hey, I paid the bills, and at the end of the month, we've got this left over, and we can do whatever we want. So to get very practical, it starts with you and I. If we want to manage the little that God has given us, and some of us say, I have very little, or even I have very much, I've got to develop a budget. Just simply tell my money where it is going. The second very practical thing that you and I can do, if we're going to manage the little things that God has given us, that God is blessing us with, that we are working for every single day, we have to avoid debt. And I know the answer. That's impossible. It's impossible to avoid debt. I get it. I understand it. When I went to college, luckily, my college was paid for. And the little bit that I had to pay for, I worked extremely hard to make sure I could pay for it. I would work my normal McDonald's job every day, go, do what I can, and then to make extra money, I would go and work for my father-in-law so that I could pay for my school. So by the end of it, I wouldn't have a debt. Now, nobody taught me that. I just thought that for me to go to school, I had to pay for it. There was no other way that I could go to school other than me paying for it. Then on the flip side, you're going to learn way more about my family than you want to know. On the flip side, my wife, when she got ready to go to college, her parents, her dad, having a blue-collar job, owning a plumbing company, working with his hands every single day, doing hard work, he looked at his daughter, knowing that he has another child as well, and says, we'll do what we can. My wife decided that she wanted to go to a Christian school, and so she chose a very expensive Christian school. And beginning to add all the numbers and everything up, her parents said, this is what we can do. The rest of it, they say you can take loans. I think you should do that. So she took out student loans. Then a few years later, we got married. I inherited student loans. And they became a part of what we just thought was normal living for everyone else. Well, everyone else is doing it, and if it's what you want to do, let's do it. And so my wife spent her first 2 years at Dallas Baptist University, and then I dropped the news, hey, babe, you want to move to Arizona? And we packed up and we moved to Arizona, and she finished out her education at Grand Canyon University. Neither one of them were cheap. And my wife became a school teacher. And when she graduated and got her first job, we were kind of excited because I was transitioning from being a computer programmer, making pretty decent money, to tell my wife that I was leaving my job to go be a youth pastor and make nothing. And then when she got her first job, we looked at each other's paychecks and we said, wow, we make less than we did when I worked. But it's okay, we'll manage. We'll manage. And in that process, living in Fountain Hills, we took on debt because it's what we thought we had to do to live to the standards that we thought we needed to live. And then a few years went by, and my wife and I decided to have our first child. And we made the decision that she was going to be a stay-at-home mom. And we were going to do it on $40,000 a year and buy a house and move to the west side of the valley. It was all great ideas. It was exciting. And we took on more debt. And it just kind of snowballed. One thing after another, the car broke down. Well, how are we going to pay to fix it? We don't have that much money in savings. I mean, we're barely making it paycheck to paycheck. And out of the generosity of others, a mechanic who was super generous and kind to us and says, I'll give you the family discount. I'll take care of you, Pastor. And we were blessed because of somebody else's generosity because they were in a position. And then other things began to happen, and we began to see other people's generosity, and it really put my wife in a position where we said to each other, this is not how we want to live. We want to live on the other side. We want to become generous. Yeah, it's nice to experience blessings from other people, but we want to be a blessing to others. And so something has to change. And what changed for my wife and I is we took financial peace. Dave Ramsey. It helped us develop a budget. It helped us to say, we're cutting up every credit card and we're going to get out of debt as fast as we possibly can, which meant we had to do something. Because we only had so much money coming in, and the amount of money that we had coming in wasn't enough to pay the amount of bills that we were receiving each month. So we made a drastic decision. Start selling everything that we don't need, and let's pay off every debt that we have. Because I'm tired of it hanging over me. I'm tired of going to the mailbox wondering, what do I owe this month? I'm tired of it. So if you and I are going to get very practical, and if we're going to manage what God has given us, whether it's a little or whether it's a lot, it starts with us making some decisions. It starts with us developing a budget and making the decision to say, I will avoid debt. If you'll turn over to Luke chapter 12, Jesus is telling a story about a manager who was put in charge of his master's household. And how the master could come back at any time. How the master could come home and the manager had to be accountable. Again, you kind of see the theme here, people managing something for someone else. And what he's doing is he's actually talking about something much deeper than just finances and just what he's managing. And so the manager goes away. Or the owner goes away and the manager's there, and Peter asks this question. Lord, what are you telling us? And this is in verse 42 of chapter 12. Peter asked, Lord, what is it that you're telling us this parable for? Is it for us or is it for everyone? The Lord answered, when then is faithful and wise manager? Or who then is the faithful and wise manager whom the master puts in charge of his servants to give them their food allowance at the proper time? It will be good for the servant whom the master finds doing so when he returns. Truly, I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose the servant says to himself, my master is taking a long time in coming. And he then begins to beat the other servants, both men and women, and to eat and drink and get drunk. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him into pieces and assign him a place with the unbelievers. I read that and I'm like, whoa, hold on, step back for just a moment. You and I, we have been put in charge of all that God has created, and he's given us opportunity to be a blessing to others. It is a foreshadowing of preparing you and I to know that one day Jesus is coming back. The Master is coming. And he's coming for you and for me. And what he's saying to us is he's saying, be prepared. Be prepared and be ready to be accountable for what God has put you in charge of. Be prepared. And this goes way beyond being generous in finances. Be prepared because you're accountable for your family. Be prepared because you're accountable for your marriage. Be prepared because you are accountable for the job that I have placed you in. Be prepared. You are accountable for the neighborhood or the apartment that you live in and the neighbors that you have. Be prepared. Be ready. He's saying, be ready. And the reality is that for most of us, the reason that we can't live a generous life is because we're not prepared. We're not prepared, and we're not ready to be accountable. It's interesting, again, you're learning so much about my family as I watch the dynamics of my boys. When it comes to accountability, one of them's like, not a problem. Yep, I did that. I am so sorry that I did that. I didn't mean to do that. Can you please forgive me? And then makes the mid-course adjustment. The other one, he's a little thicker in the head. It takes a little bit more patience on my part and his mom's part. But he's a little slower at realizing when he needs to be accountable for something he did or didn't do. The same thing's true for you and for me. For some of us, when it comes to being prepared and being accountable, yes, this is what God has given me. This is the life. The decisions I have made have brought me to where I am. Nobody else did this to me. Nobody else put my wife and I in the position that we were in. We made every decision to get there. But we also made the decision to get out of there. And because of the decisions that we have made, we have put our boys on a radically different course than what we were on. My son's in his third year of college, and he hasn't taken out one single loan to pay for his school. But we wanted to make our son accountable. He had to help pay for college, whether that was through getting scholarships or him paying a portion of his school. And I know for some, they're like, hold on, wait a minute. That's the parents' responsibility, or that's the kids' responsibility. We went in this together with a plan, knowing how we were going to approach college. We've told both of our kids, hey, this is our approach. Neither one of you will take out student loans because it took your mom and I almost 20 years to pay off her loans. Being diligent month after month. And we don't want you to have to do that. Your mom took out more loans than what a teacher got paid when she graduated. It didn't make sense. We don't want you to do that. Now, me, on the flip side, I had some very generous places where I served One of my first churches that I served in, they paid for me to go to seminary as part of my compensation. I didn't make much, but I got to go to school for free. We have to be prepared. We have to be accountable for where we are. Nobody puts us in the positions that we're in. We make the decisions every day, whether to stay there or to get out. The problem is that for most of us, the reason that we don't get out of the situation that we're in is because we feel some type of pressure from outside voices that really don't care anyway. Outside pressures of, well, I've got to live a certain status or style or a certain way because people will perceive me for the way that I look, the places that I live, or the cars that I drive, or the job that I have. And we get into this rat race. And for most of us, we're drowning. And Jesus is saying to you and to me, that's not the way it's meant to be. I've put you where you are because I want you to manage. And if you can manage the small things, you will begin to work up, and I will give you more responsibility. And you can look back and say, well, others have been given more responsibility, and they're in the same trouble that I am. Don't compare yourself to others. Only look at where God has you. Because comparing myself to others makes me blind to the other things that are going on in their life. I don't know how they got there. I don't know what decisions they made to be where they are, just like you don't know how I got to where I am. Do you know how awesome it is to get to the place where everything you do is cash and you just pay cash for everything? To have that freedom, to know that when an opportunity comes, we can be generous and we can begin to live a life of generosity. So if you're going to take some steps for you to begin to live a generous life, to begin to move from stress to stewardship, and that word stewardship is an old English word that just simply means to manage. You are going to manage what you've been given. It starts off with you making a budget. You got to make a budget. I know it's a practical thing that I talked about, but make a budget. And I'm not going to have you do a show of hands, how many of us have a budget and how many of us don't have a budget. You know. Go home today and make a budget. A simple budget that tells you where every dollar you make goes. Because the reality is, in my family, we have two types of people. We have the saver and we have the spender. I'll let you guess which one I am. My wife is the saver, I'm the spender. And so early on in our marriage, man, it created some friction where we butted heads because she's like, we don't spend a dime. I'm like, well, but it doesn't work. We got to figure this out. Make a budget. And we had what we call the meeting of the minds, where we sat down at the table with one another and we said, look, no idea is a bad idea. Don't condemn anything I say, and I won't condemn anything you say, and let's walk away from this table with a plan, with a budget. So we walked away, built in our budget early on that I got an allowance. And I know some of you are like, you're an adult, you don't need an allowance. No, it's my money and she has her money. She can do whatever she wants with her money. She can save it, she can spend it, she can do whatever. I can do whatever I want. I can save it, I can spend it, I can whatever. I can allow it to build up paycheck after paycheck where I have this larger lump sum and I do something else that I want to do with it. I buy something, whatever it is. But we built it in. We built in, hey, we're going to go out to eat. This is how much we're allowed to spend when we go out to eat. Hey, these are other bills that we have to pay, our must-pays. Anybody that owns a business knows exactly what I'm talking about. These are my must-pays. These are the other categories. We build in our budget buying a new car. Hey, we know that our cars are going to break down, so we have a car fund. And we put money into that fund every time that we get paid. And when it's time to do a repair, I go pull money out and I pay for that repair. When we're ready to buy a car, I use that money to go buy a car. Whatever it is. You build a budget to where you tell your money what to do. The second thing after you make a budget is you tackle your debt. Do whatever it takes to tackle your debt. Sell whatever you have to sell to pay off your debt. Pay it off. Yes, it's a sacrifice. If it means you sell your car that you have a huge car payment on and you buy a car that you can pay cash for and it's a junker and you have to drive it for 3 or 4 years, so what? So what? My image isn't based off the car that I drive. I want my image to be based off of the generosity that I give, the life that I live. Sell it. My wife and I, when we made that decision, we went through everything. Let's sell everything that we don't need. I mean, we were selling furniture. I mean, for a while, we sold our dining room table because we're like, we can get a lot of money for that. Let's sell it. Later, when we can pay cash, we'll pay cash. And what was amazing is we sold it, and then somebody else gave us a dining room table. It wasn't the fanciest dining room table, but it worked for me and my family. We just made the decision that we were willing to do whatever it took to get out of debt, to tackle debt. We started with the smallest thing that we owed, and we just built from there. It was so freeing. My wife and I, as we celebrated with one another, we just paid that off. This is awesome. It feels great. There was just this weight that was lifted off of us. So we made a budget. We tackled debt. And then we set aside for giving. We built in our budget to be generous. For us, we started our generosity with the church first because we believed in building the kingdom. We want to build the kingdom, so we said, this is what we're going to give. Every time we get paid, we're giving this amount. And for me, when it comes to giving to the church, I think there are 3 categories. I think there's my tithe, where I bring in my tithe every week, every time I get paid. I think there's an offering which is above and beyond. I'm going to give because God's told me to give to this additional thing above and beyond what I'm already giving to the church. And then I think there's a sacrifice where it is a gut-wrenching moment where you make that decision. Hey, we've been setting this money aside to buy countertops for our house, but we feel like the Lord is telling us not to buy countertops, but to help this family, or to do this, or to give to this organization. And so within that moment, we do that. So we set aside, we build to give, whatever it is. And for us, we started small. We started really small. And we just began to build from there. We just set a dollar amount and said, okay, this is how much we're going to give. And then as we got more freedom, we gave more. And when I was about 35, I had this little old lady look me straight in the eyes and she says, Pastor, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to outgive God. I want to challenge you just to get to the place where you're giving away more than what you need. And so that's where my wife and I, we're pursuing that, to where we live a life of generosity, where we just keep giving. And so for us, we've set aside not only giving to the church, but other organizations outside of it. So much so that we just have it debited out of our account every month because we're committed to it. And it's created a trickle effect in my family, to where my kids are like, okay, this is the way we want to live. It's now impacted not just us, but my wife's family, where her mom and dad began to see a difference in us and say, we want that. We're tired of living under the stress of debt and finances and the weight that it's carrying. And they were in their 60s when they made this decision. 5 years ago, I sat down with my mom and helped her build a budget at 65 for the very first time. And you know how awesome it was when my mom called me about 4 months ago and she says, son, I'm going on a cruise and I'm paying cash for it. That was awesome for me. And so when you think of generosity, yes, finances are one area, but it's not the only area. But it is a way that you and I can begin to live a generous life. and begin to put others before ourselves. So here's my challenge for you, for your next step. Two different things. One, you heard about it last week. Pastor Brett talked about texting the word generous to 623-323-9202 and be a part of a text challenge that you'll get things for yourself, or if you have a family, for you and your family, where you're getting things to help you begin to put into practice to live a generous life. And it doesn't have to do solely with finances. It could simply be bake cookies and go give them to your neighbor. That's being generous. And it's the craziest thing. One year, my family decided to do exactly that. We're going to bake cookies. We're going to go to everybody's door, and we're going to give them cookies. People looked at us like we were crazy. But I know my neighbors, and they know me. So maybe that's your next step. You're going to text the word generous to 623-323-9202. Maybe for you, your next step is to take Financial Peace University. We're offering Financial Peace. It's going to be launching on October the 2nd, which is a Wednesday night from 6 to 8 p.m. Childcare is provided. And maybe that's for you. And here's the beauty of FPU. It's for all stages. Maybe you would say, I've already got the debt conquered. I'm already over that. I've already passed that. Maybe for you, I've got to figure out how to actually begin to prepare for retirement. Maybe you're already in retirement. And maybe for you, it's, hey, I'm in retirement. I'm on a fixed income. I've got to go back to developing a budget. I'm not where I used to be. I'm not getting bonuses or extra things that are coming in. So I've got to realign. I don't know where you are, but I want to encourage you this morning to take one of these two steps to where you can move from living a stressed life and begin to be generous and a blessing to others. Will you pray with me? Father, Lord God, we thank you for today, that your word is powerful. And that yes, when we talk about finances and money, our natural response is just to clam up. Don't want to talk about it. Don't want to deal with it. If you could just give me a money tree in the backyard, it would solve all my problems. But God, right now, in these next few moments, I pray that we would just simply get real with you and take a step forward to wherever we are so that we can begin to live beyond ourselves, to be generous, to plan, to prepare. Because the reality is one day we'll all be accountable. We'll stand before you just like this guy stands before the master. Here's what I did. But the blood of Jesus covers us. And you see us not because of where we've been or what we've done, but you see us in light of the work that Christ did for us on the cross. And we thank you for that today, Father. So move and speak in these next few moments as we continue to worship. It's in Jesus' name, amen.